The Valoran Empire had ruled the stars for 800 years. They had conquered 600 worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their ships were massive and powerful. Their soldiers were tall and strong. Their weapons could turn cities to dust in seconds. No species had ever defeated them. No species had ever tried for very long. When their scout vessels first detected Earth, Fleet Commander Torvax looked at the reports with boredom. It was a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. The natives had only recently learned to travel in space. Their technology was primitive. Their weapons were laughable. They had no shields, no plasma cannons, no faster-than-light communication. Torvax gave the order without much thought. Send the standard message. Demand surrender. If they refused, crush them. It would take perhaps 1 rotation of their planet. Maybe 2. Then Earth would join the long list of conquered worlds, and the Empire would move on to the next target. The message was simple and direct. It had worked on hundreds of worlds before. People of this planet, you are now under the authority of the Valoran Empire. Surrender your governments, your resources, and your military forces. Resistance will be met with complete destruction. You have 1 planetary rotation to comply. Lieutenant Yuna was the first human to receive the transmission. She was 28 years old, born in a small coastal town in Korea. She had joined the Korean Space Defense Force 5 years ago, dreaming of exploring the stars. Now she sat aboard the orbital station Haniel, watching her console light up with an alien signal. She read the message 3 times. Her coffee grew cold in her hand. She thought about her mother, who was probably sleeping in her small apartment back home. She thought about her younger brother, who was studying to become a doctor. She thought about the billions of people on the planet below who had no idea that everything was about to change. Then she laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a scared laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had read too many history books. She knew what happened when powerful forces demanded that Koreans surrender. She knew the answer her people had given every time. She forwarded the message to command. Then she leaned back in her chair and waited. Within hours, the world knew. Every government received the transmission. Every military leader read the demands. Every news channel broadcast the message. For a brief moment, humanity stood still, looking up at the sky where alien ships waited. Some people panicked. Some people prayed. Some people cried. But then something strange happened. Something the Valorans had never seen before on any world they had conquered. Humanity got angry. General Doyen was 62 years old. He had fought in 3 wars during his career. He had seen friends die. He had ordered men into battles they would not survive. He had buried soldiers who were younger than his own children. War had carved deep lines into his face and turned his hair white. But his eyes were still sharp, and his voice was still steady. He addressed the United Defense Council from Seoul. Leaders from every nation watched on screens. For the first time in human history, there were no arguments about borders or politics or old grudges. There was only the message from the sky. "They have made a mistake," Doyen said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "They think we are like the other species they have conquered. They think we will see their power and fall to our knees. They think we are afraid to die." He paused, looking at the faces watching him. "They are wrong." The response was unanimous. Every nation agreed. Every leader signed. Every military force mobilized. For the first time in history, humanity spoke with one voice. The Valoran Armada entered Earth's orbit 3 days later. 2,000 vessels of various sizes filled the sky. Their shadows fell across continents. Their weapons powered up, ready to demonstrate their power. Ambassador Tolan, who had overseen the surrender of 30 worlds, prepared his acceptance speech. He expected silence. He expected fear. He expected desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, every satellite began broadcasting the same message. It went out in 400 languages, in every dialect humans spoke, in every format the aliens could receive. Come and take it. Ambassador Tolan stared at his screen. He did not understand. This had never happened before. Conquered species always surrendered when they saw the armada. They always chose survival over pride. They always submitted. What does this mean? He asked his translator. The translator, a small alien from a species conquered long ago, looked at the message with something strange in his eyes. Something that might have been recognition. Something that might have been hope. It means they refuse, Ambassador. That is not possible. They cannot refuse. They have no chance of victory. They know this, Ambassador. They refuse anyway. Tolan turned to Fleet Commander Torvax, who was watching the situation from the command ship with growing irritation. Commander, they have rejected our terms. Torvax waved his clawed hand dismissively. Then, we proceed with standard subjugation. Deploy ground forces to establish control. Target their military installations with orbital strikes. This will be over in days. On the planet below, General Do-hyun watched the alien ships move into attack formation. He stood in a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Korea, surrounded by screens showing military positions around the world. He knew the enemy was stronger. He knew they had better weapons. He knew that victory was nearly impossible. But he also knew something the Valorans did not understand. He knew his people. He knew humanity. He opened a channel to every soldier, every pilot, every sailor, every civilian volunteer who had picked up a weapon. They are coming, he said. They think this will be easy. They think we will break. They have never met humans before. Show them who we are. Show them what we do to invaders. Show them that Earth does not kneel. Lieutenant Yuna listened to the general's words aboard the Hanyul station. She looked out the window at the massive alien ships approaching. They were beautiful in a terrible way, like sharks moving through dark water. She was scared. She would have been a fool not to be scared. But beneath the fear, she felt something else. Something hot and stubborn and ancient. Something that had lived in her ancestors when they faced impossible enemies. Something that refused to give up. She checked her weapons console. The station had only defensive systems. Small guns meant to destroy space debris. They would be useless against those massive warships. But useless was not the same as silent. All stations, she said into her com. Power up everything we have. If they want Earth, they will have to take it from our cold, dead hands. Across the planet, humans prepared to fight. Soldiers dug into positions. Pilots climbed into cockpits. Civilians gathered weapons, supplies, and courage. They built shelters and barriers and traps. They said goodbye to their families and wrote letters they hoped would survive. The Valoran Empire had conquered 600 worlds. They had never lost a war. They had never faced a species that would choose death over submission. They were about to learn that Earth was different. The first Valoran dropships descended through the atmosphere as the sun set over Asia. They expected to land without resistance. They expected the humans to scatter and hide. Instead, the sky filled with fire. The war for Earth had begun. The Valarans chose the Korean peninsula for their first landing. Their strategists had studied Earth's geography from orbit. They saw mountains and forests and narrow valleys. They thought this terrain would make it easy to control the population. They thought the humans would have nowhere to run. They did not understand that Koreans had been fighting in these mountains for thousands of years. Ambassador Tolan watched the landing from his command ship in orbit. He was a diplomat, not a soldier, but he had overseen many conquests. He knew how these things usually went. The ground forces would establish control of major cities. The population would resist for a few days, maybe a week. Then they would see the futility of fighting and accept their new rulers. "Status report," he said to his tactical officer. Kreth was a scarred veteran who had fought on 20 worlds. He looked at his screens with an expression Tolan did not recognize. "The landing is proceeding, Ambassador. But our scouts report unusual activity in the population centers." "What kind of activity?" "They are not fleeing, sir." Tolan frowned. "Explain." "On most worlds, when we land, the civilians run away from our forces. They hide. They try to escape. These humans are not running. They are moving toward our landing zones. And they are carrying weapons." This made no sense to Tolan. Civilians were supposed to be afraid. Civilians were supposed to want to survive. Why would ordinary people with primitive weapons move toward an invading army? He would learn the answer very soon. Sergeant Yunji was 26 years old. Before the invasion, she had been a normal soldier in the Korean army. She had trained in the mountains, learned to survive in the cold, practiced combat in rough terrain. She had never imagined she would fight aliens, but she had always been ready to fight whoever threatened her home. She led her squad through the forests outside Gangwon province. There were 12 of them, moving silently through the trees. They wore camouflage that blended with the rocks and leaves. They carried rifles, grenades, and knives. They also carried something the Valorans could not see on their scanners: hatred. Yunji had watched the alien ships appear in the sky. She had heard their demands for surrender. She had seen the videos of other conquered worlds, species broken and enslaved, their cultures erased, their people treated like animals. She had made a decision in that moment. She would die before she let that happen to her people. Her squad had been watching the Valoran patrol for 2 hours. The aliens were impressive in a terrible way. They stood 8 feet tall, with scaled skin the color of dark metal. Their armor gleamed in the dim forest light. Their weapons hummed with energy that made Yunji's teeth ache. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything that could hurt them. There were 50 of them. 50 heavily armed alien soldiers with technology centuries ahead of anything on Earth, against 12 Koreans with rifles. The Valarans should have won easily. Their armor could stop bullets. Their sensors could detect movement from a kilometer away. Their training had prepared them for combat against 100 different species. But they had never fought humans. Yunji waited until the patrol entered the narrow valley her squad had prepared. She waited until they were deep in the kill zone, surrounded by trees and rocks and shadows. She waited until she could smell the strange, sharp scent of their alien bodies. Then she gave the signal. The forest exploded. IEDs buried under the path detonated first, throwing alien bodies into the air. Before the survivors could react, rifle fire came from every direction. The soldiers could not see their attackers. The bullets were too small and fast to track. Their armor helped, but bullets found gaps, joints, the soft tissue around their eyes. The Valorans tried to return fire. Their plasma weapons turned trees to ash and rocks to glass. But they were shooting at shadows. Every time they fired at one position, attacks came from another. The humans moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing, never staying in one place long enough to target. Yunji killed 3 of them herself. She aimed for the neck, where the armor was thinnest. She watched them fall and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 37 Valoran soldiers were dead. Another 8 were wounded so badly they could not fight. Only 5 escaped into the forest, running in a panic that their species had not felt in centuries. Yunji lost 2 of her squad, Private Junsu and Corporal Hannah. They had been her friends. They had trained together, eaten together, laughed together. Now they were dead, their bodies lying among the alien corpses. She knelt beside them for a moment, touching their faces. Then she stood up and turned to her surviving soldiers. "Strip the bodies. Take their weapons, their armor, anything useful. We move in 5 minutes. There will be more of them coming." Across the peninsula, similar scenes played out. The Valorans had landed expecting easy conquest. They found something very different. In the cities, civilians attacked supply convoys with homemade bombs. In the countryside, farmers who had hunted deer their whole lives now hunted aliens. In the mountains, old military tunnels became bases for resistance fighters who struck and vanished like smoke. By nightfall on the first day, the Valorans had lost 300 soldiers. Earth had lost 12. Ambassador Tolan received a casualty report in his quarters. He read it 3 times, certain there must be a mistake. 300 soldiers in one day, against a primitive species with no space technology. This was impossible. He called Fleet Commander Torvax. "Commander, we have a problem." Torvax looked annoyed. "What problem?" "The invasion is proceeding. We have lost 300 ground troops in the first 12 hours. Silence. Torvax's yellow eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The humans are not fighting like a normal species, Commander. They are using tactics we have never encountered. They hide, they strike, they disappear. They attack from everywhere and nowhere. Our soldiers cannot find them until it is too late." Torvax made a sound of contempt. "They are primitives. They cannot defeat our forces." "With respect, Commander, they already have. Multiple times." The strategic meeting that night was tense. The Lauren officers argued about what to do. Some wanted to continue the ground invasion with more troops. Others suggested heavier orbital bombardment to break the human resistance. Kreth, the tactical officer who had fought on 20 worlds, spoke quietly. "I have studied their history, Ambassador. This species, they have been fighting each other for their entire existence. War is part of their nature. They have developed techniques specifically designed to defeat stronger enemies. They call it guerrilla warfare." "We have faced resistance before," Tolan said. "Not like this. Other species resist for days, maybe weeks. Then they accept the inevitable. These humans, their history shows wars that lasted decades, centuries. They do not stop fighting because they are losing. They do not stop fighting because their situation is hopeless. They just keep fighting until they win or until every single one of them is dead." The room fell silent. On the ground, Sergeant Yunji led her surviving squad to a rendezvous point deep in the mountains. Other squads were gathering there, sharing captured weapons and information. She found General Doyen himself, directing operations from a hidden bunker. He looked at her with tired eyes. "Report, Sergeant. 37 confirmed kills, sir. We lost 2. Do-hyun nodded slowly. "Good work. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be harder." "Sir?" Yunji hesitated. "Can we win this?" The old general looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a thin and bitter expression. "Probably not, Sergeant. They have ships that can burn our cities from orbit. They have weapons we cannot match. They have conquered 600 worlds. Then why are we fighting? Because surrender is not victory, Sergeant. Because slavery is not survival. Because if we must die, we will die on our feet, not on our knees." He put a hand on her shoulder. "And because humans have a way of winning wars we should have lost. It is in our nature." Yunji understood. She returned to her squad, cleaned her rifle, and prepared for another day of war. Above them, the Valaran ships orbited a planet that refused to break. And something in the galaxy began to shift. The Valarans adapted. They had conquered 600 worlds because they learned from their mistakes. When guerrilla tactics killed their ground troops, they changed their approach. They stopped sending soldiers into forests and mountains. They stopped trying to control the countryside. Instead, they used their greatest advantage. Fleet Commander Torvax gave the order on the 14th day of the invasion. If the humans would not surrender on the ground, he would break them from the sky. The orbital bombardment began at noon. Valoran ships positioned themselves above military bases, industrial centers, and government buildings. Their weapons charged with a sound that could be heard even through the atmosphere, a deep hum that made the air itself vibrate. Then fire fell from the sky. Seoul survived the first strikes because of the bunkers. Koreans had been building underground shelters for decades, preparing for a different war that never came. Those shelters now saved millions of lives as plasma beams turned the surface into glass and ash. But other cities were not so lucky. Bizen burned in 7 minutes. The port city, home to 3 million people, became a crater of melted metal and scorched stone. Emergency services could not respond because there was nothing left to respond to. The dead numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Captain Jisoo was at sea when it happened. She commanded a submarine, one of the few military assets that the Valorans could not easily target from orbit. She was running silent beneath the Pacific, listening to radio communications when the news came. Bizen was gone. Her parents were gone. Her sister was gone. Her nieces, 5 and 7 years old, were gone. She did not cry. She did not scream. She sat in her command chair and felt something inside her turn to ice. The fear she had carried since the invasion began disappeared. In its place was something cold and hard and patient. She opened a channel to her crew. The enemy has killed our families. They have burned our cities. They think this will make us surrender. Her voice was steady, almost calm. They are wrong. We are going to make them pay for every life they have taken. Prepare nuclear weapons for surface launch. Earth submarines carried missiles from the old wars, weapons designed to fight other humans. Those weapons were terrible and destructive, but they were also the only things that could hurt Valoran ships. The aliens had shields that stopped most attacks, but their shields were weaker in atmosphere. When they descended low enough to conduct precision strikes, they became vulnerable. Jisoo waited. She tracked Valoran ship movements through a network of hidden sensors. She calculated trajectories and timing. She was patient, because patience was the only advantage she had. On the 19th day, 7 Valoran cruisers descended into the lower atmosphere to strike targets in North America. Their commanders believed they were safe. No human weapon had touched them yet. Jisoo gave the order. 12 submarines fired simultaneously. Nuclear missiles rose from the ocean, breaking through the surface in columns of steam and fire. The Valorans detected them, but too late. Their point defense systems destroyed some missiles, but not all. 7 cruisers vanished in atomic fire. The explosions lit up the sky across 3 continents. On her command ship, Fleet Commander Torvax watched the destruction in disbelief. 7 ships. Thousands of crew. Gone in seconds to primitive weapons that these humans had built to kill each other. How? He demanded. How did they do this? No one could answer him. On the ground, the resistance grew stronger. The orbital bombardment had killed millions, but it had also made every survivor into a fighter. People who had never touched a weapon now learned to shoot. Factory workers who had built cars now built bombs. Teachers who had taught children now taught sabotage. Hyunwoo was one of them. He was 43 years old, a factory worker who had spent 20 years making electronics. He had a wife and 2 sons. When the invasion began, he sent them to a shelter in the countryside and stayed behind to fight. He learned quickly. He learned that Valoran technology, for all its power, was vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses. He learned that their communication systems used specific frequencies that could be jammed. He learned that their officers wore distinctive markings that made them easy targets. He led a network of saboteurs through the ruins of Seoul. They moved through subway tunnels and sewers, striking at Valoran patrols and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. They captured weapons and learned to use them. They killed aliens and took their armor. Every night, Humu recorded messages for his family, even though he knew they might never receive them. He told his sons about the war. He told them why he was fighting. He told them that some things were more important than survival. There are worse things than dying, he said in one recording. Living as a slave is worse. Watching your people be erased is worse. Remember this. Never let anyone take your freedom without a fight. The turning point came on the 43rd day. Mireille was 24 years old, a pilot who had barely finished her training when the invasion began. She flew a fighter jet that was held together with salvaged parts and desperate repairs. Her squadron had been reduced from 12 pilots to 3. She had watched her friends die in flames, shot down by enemies they could barely see. But she was still alive. And she had volunteered for an impossible mission. The resistance had gathered footage from across the planet. Videos of Valoran atrocities. Images of burned cities and mass graves. Recordings of human defiance, soldiers fighting to the last bullet, civilians throwing themselves at alien troops, children singing songs of resistance in underground shelters. This footage needed to reach the galaxy. If other species saw what was happening on Earth, maybe they would help. Maybe they would rebel against the Valoran Empire. Maybe somehow humanity would not die alone. The problem was the orbital blockade. Thousands of Valoran ships surrounded Earth, destroying any vessel that tried to leave. No human craft had broken through. Mireille intended to be the first. She launched at night, flying low over the Pacific to avoid detection. Her jet was modified with every piece of alien technology the Resistance had captured. Her flight path was calculated to exploit gaps in Valoran sensor coverage. Her chances of survival were less than 1%. She did not care about survival. She cared about the data package strapped to her chest, the message that humanity had prepared for the galaxy. The climb to orbit was violent. G-forces pressed her into her seat until she could barely breathe. Alarms screamed as Valoran ships detected her. Plasma bolts streaked past her cockpit, close enough to feel the heat through the glass. She flew through fire and death, spinning and diving and climbing, using every trick she had learned and some she invented in the moment. Ships exploded around her as human batteries on the ground provided covering fire. For one impossible minute, she was the center of the greatest battle in human history. Then she was through. The blockade was behind her. Empty space stretched ahead. Her jet was damaged, leaking fuel and oxygen, but it was still flying. She was still alive. She activated the transmission beacon and broadcast the message in every direction, on every frequency, as loud and clear as she could. This is Earth. We are under attack by the Valoran Empire. They came to enslave us, and we chose to fight. We are dying, but we are not surrendering. If you are watching this, know that resistance is possible. Know that tyrants can bleed. Know that Earth will never kneel. The message raced outward at the speed of light, carrying images and sounds of human defiance to stars that had never heard of Earth. Mireille watched the transmission indicator blink green. The message was sent. Whatever happened next, she had done her part. Her fuel ran out 17 minutes later. Her jet drifted in the cold darkness between planets, slowly losing heat and oxygen. She looked out at the stars she would never reach and smiled. "Worth it," she whispered. Her message reached 400 civilizations within a week, and something began to change in the galaxy. The Valoran Empire had ruled the galaxy for 800 years. In that time, They had conquered species of every kind. Tall and short, strong and weak, ancient and young. Some had advanced technology. Some had powerful armies. Some had populations in the billions. None of them had resisted for long. The pattern was always the same. The Valorans would arrive with their armada. They would demand surrender. Most species would submit immediately, recognizing that resistance was hopeless. Those who fought would be crushed quickly and completely. Within a few months, every conquered world would accept their place in the empire. This was the way of things. This was the natural order. The strong ruled, and the weak obeyed. Everyone in the galaxy understood this. Then they saw Earth. The Morath were a species of desert dwellers from the planet Thesa. They had been conquered 3 generations ago. Their warriors had fought bravely for 6 weeks before surrendering. Now they worked in mines and factories, producing resources for the empire. Their children were born into slavery, knowing nothing else. When Murray's transmission reached Thesa, the Morath gathered in secret to watch. They saw images of human cities burning. They saw footage of human soldiers fighting against impossible odds. They saw a woman named Sujin leading a group of freed prisoners against a Valoran garrison. Sujin was 31 years old. She had been a police officer before the invasion. When the Valorans captured her city, they rounded up thousands of humans for transport to labor camps. Sujin was among them. She refused to stay captured. Using a piece of broken metal she had hidden in her clothes, she killed her guard and took his weapon. She freed other prisoners. Together, they attacked the garrison with stolen guns and pure fury. They knew they would probably die. They attacked anyway. The footage showed the battle in terrible detail. Humans falling to plasma fire. Humans throwing themselves at armored aliens with nothing but knives. Humans dying with screams of rage on their lips. Sujin died in that battle, shot 17 times before she finally fell. But the garrison fell with her. The Morath watched this in silence. They remembered their own warriors, who had surrendered when the situation became hopeless. They remembered being told that resistance was pointless. They remembered accepting their fate. These humans did not accept their fate. These humans fought even when fighting meant death. These humans refused to kneel. An old Morath warrior named Threx turned to the others. His scales were gray with age, and his eyes had seen too much suffering. But something new burned in those eyes now. "We were wrong," he said. "We were told that we could not fight. We believed it. But look at them. They are weaker than the Valorans. Their technology is primitive. They are dying by the millions. And still they fight. What are you saying?" A young Morath asked. "I am saying that if these humans can resist, so can we." On the ice moon of Krell, a species called the Veth had lived under Valoran rule for 200 years. They were small creatures, standing only 4 feet tall, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. The Valorans used them for delicate technical work, tasks that required small hands and careful attention. The Veth had given up hope long ago. Their planet was frozen and barren. Their population was small. They had no army, no weapons, no chance of freedom. They simply existed, serving their masters and waiting for death. Then they received the transmission from Earth. They saw General Doyun standing in a bunker as Valoran ships burned cities around him. Ambassador Tolan had demanded his surrender. The general's response was broadcast to the entire planet. "You can kill us all," Doyun said. His voice was calm and steady. "You can burn every city and murder every child. You can erase our species from the galaxy. But you cannot make us obey. You cannot make us kneel. You cannot take our spirit." The Veth listened to these words and felt something they had not felt in generations. Hope. It spread through the conquered worlds, like fire through dry grass. Species who had submitted centuries ago now whispered about the humans of Earth. They shared the transmission secretly, passing it from hand to hand, watching it over and over. The footage of human resistance became legendary. A pilot breaking through the blockade. A sergeant ambushing 50 Valoran soldiers with 12 fighters. Civilians attacking supply convoys with homemade weapons. Children singing defiant songs in underground shelters. And everywhere, the same message: Earth will never kneel. The first uprising began on Thessa. Thrax and other old warriors gathered weapons that had been hidden for generations. They attacked the Valoran mining operation, killing the guards and freeing the workers. Within days, the entire desert region was in rebellion. The Valarans sent troops to crush the uprising. But their troops were needed on Earth. They could not spare enough forces to fight 2 wars at once. The Morth rebellion grew. Then Krell rose up. The Veth, small and weak, used their technical skills to sabotage Valoran equipment. Ships malfunctioned. Weapons failed. Communication systems went dark. The Ice Moon became a nightmare for its occupiers. Then another world. And another. And another. Fleet Commander Torvax received reports of uprisings across the Empire. 12 worlds, then 20, then 50. Species that had been obedient for centuries were suddenly fighting back. And all of them were inspired by the same thing: Earth. "This is impossible," Torvax said to Ambassador Tolan. "One primitive planet cannot cause this much chaos." Tolan had spent months watching the humans fight. He understood something that Torvax did not. "They have shown the galaxy that resistance is possible, Commander." Every conquered species believed that fighting the Empire was hopeless. Now they have seen humans fight despite hopelessness. They have seen humans die rather than surrender. They have seen that the mighty Valorans can bleed. We will crush them all. Every uprising, every rebellion, every act of defiance. Perhaps. But can we do it while also fighting Earth? Our forces are stretched thin. Every ship we send to suppress rebellions is a ship we cannot use against the humans. And every day we fail to conquer Earth, more species find the courage to resist. An elderly strategist named Veth spoke quietly from the corner of the room. He had served the Empire for 60 years. He had seen countless conquests. He had never seen anything like this. "The humans have given the galaxy something we cannot destroy with weapons, Commander. They have given them hope. And hope is more dangerous than any army." Torvax slammed his fist on the table. "Then we will finish Earth quickly. We will destroy every city, kill every human, burn the planet until nothing remains. Then the galaxy will see that resistance is futile. And if that takes years? If the humans fight to the last individual? How many more worlds will rise up while we are occupied?" No one could answer this question. On Earth, the war continued. Humans died by the millions. Cities fell. Resources ran out. Every day brought new horrors and new losses. But every day also brought news from the stars. Reports of uprisings on distant worlds. Messages of support from species humanity had never heard of. Proof that their sacrifice was not meaningless. General Donheen read these reports in his bunker and felt something like peace. "We may not survive this," he told his officers. "But we have already won something. We have shown the galaxy that tyrants can be fought. We have lit a fire that will not go out." Sergeant Yunji, who had survived 100 battles and lost count of her kills, looked at the reports from alien worlds with wonder. "They are fighting because of us," she said. "They are dying because we showed them how. Is that a good thing?" Another soldier asked. Yunji thought about this for a long moment. "Yes," she said finally. "If we die, at least we die knowing that our example lives on. Knowing that what we did mattered. Knowing that Earth taught the galaxy how to resist." The stars were burning with rebellion. And at the center of it all was a small blue planet that refused to surrender. The war lasted 3 years. In that time, Earth lost 2 billion people. Cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to ash. Entire regions became wastelands of radiation and fire. The oceans rose from melted ice caps. The skies darkened with dust and smoke. The planet that humanity had called home was scarred beyond recognition. But humanity did not break. Survivors lived in bunkers, caves, and ruins. They emerged only to fight, striking at Valoran forces and disappearing back into the devastated landscape. They ate whatever they could find. They made weapons from scraps. They taught their children to fight before they taught them to read. General Dohyun died in the 2nd year, killed when a Valoran strike destroyed his bunker. Sergeant Yoonji died leading a charge against an alien stronghold, buying time for civilians to escape. Factory worker Hyunwoo died defending a food convoy, taking 4 Valoran soldiers with him. They were replaced by others. New leaders rose from the ashes. New fighters took up weapons. New heroes emerged from ordinary people who refused to give up. Captain Jisoo survived. Their submarines had become the most feared weapons on Earth, striking from the depths and vanishing before the enemy could respond. She had sunk 53 Valoran ships. Her hair had turned white from stress and radiation exposure. She moved slowly, her body worn out from years of war. But her eyes were still sharp, and her will was unbroken. In the 3rd year, something changed. The uprisings across the galaxy had crippled the Valoran Empire. Dozens of worlds were in open rebellion. Supply lines were cut. Military forces were spread across 100 fronts. The mighty empire that had conquered 600 worlds was bleeding from 1,000 wounds. And at the center of it all was Earth, undefeated, unbowed. Fleet Commander Torvax was dead, killed when his flagship was destroyed by a coordinated attack from human submarines and captured alien vessels. The new commander, a young officer named Korath, looked at the situation with fresh eyes. Earth had cost the Empire more than any conquest in history. Ships, soldiers, resources, time, all poured into a single planet that refused to submit. And every day the war continued, more worlds found the courage to rebel. Korath made a calculation that no Valoran commander had made in 800 years. "Withdraw," he ordered. Ambassador Tolan stared at him. "Withdraw? We cannot withdraw. We have never withdrawn. We have also never faced this situation. Earth cannot be conquered quickly. Every month we spend here, we lose 3 more worlds elsewhere. The mathematics are simple. This planet is not worth the Empire. The galaxy will see us as weak. The galaxy already sees us as beatable. The humans have made sure of that. Staying here will not change this. It will only make things worse." The debate raged for weeks. But in the end, practical concerns won. The Valoran Empire could not afford to keep fighting Earth. They needed their ships and soldiers elsewhere. The final battle took place above Earth's scarred surface. Admiral Taeyong commanded what remained of humanity's fleet. He was 63 years old. Before the war, he had been a fishing boat captain, spending his days on calm waters, thinking about nothing more important than the weather and the catch. Now he led a fleet of salvaged ships, stolen vessels, and desperate warriors into battle against the most powerful empire in the galaxy. His wife had died in the 1st year, killed in the bombardment of Bizon. His 2 sons had died fighting in the mountains, one in the 2nd year and one in the 3rd. He had buried them himself, in graves marked with stones because there was no wood left for proper markers. He had nothing left but the fight, and he intended to make it count. "All ships," he said over the comm. His voice was calm and steady, like he was still directing fishing boats through a storm. "Today we show them what humans are made of. Today we finish what we started 3 years ago. Today, we teach the galaxy that Earth is not to be ruled. The battle was brutal. Human ships were smaller and weaker than Valoran vessels. They relied on speed, surprise, and tactics that no enemy had ever seen before. They rammed ships when their weapons ran out. They crashed into enemy vessels when their engines failed. They fought with a fury that made the Valorans hesitate. Earth lost half its remaining fleet. Thousands of humans died in the cold darkness of space, their last breaths fogging their helmets, their last thoughts on home. But when the battle ended, the Valoran flagship drifted dark and silent. Commander Karth was dead. The remaining enemy ships were pulling back, engines pushing them toward the edge of the system. They were leaving. Admiral Tehen watched them go. He was wounded, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his left arm hanging useless at his side. Around him, his bridge crew cheered and wept and embraced each other. He thought about his wife. He thought about his sons. He thought about the billions who had died to make this moment possible. It was worth it, he whispered. All of it. It was worth it. Ambassador Tolan, the last senior Valaran official in the system, sent a final transmission to his homeworld. His voice was hollow and broken. Earth cannot be conquered. Their losses are meaningless to them. They will fight until extinction, and they will take us with them. They have broken our empire. They have inspired rebellion across the galaxy. They have shown every conquered species that we can be defeated. He paused, looking at the blue planet below. Even scarred and burning, it was beautiful. I recommend complete withdrawal. This world is beyond our ability to control. These humans are beyond our understanding. Leave them to their planet. Pray that they never come looking for us. The Valoran Empire retreated from Earth. It was the first time in 800 years they had abandoned the conquest. It would not be the last. 50 years later, Earth had rebuilt. The scars remained. Radiation zones covered entire continents. Mass graves dotted the landscape, marked with monuments to the dead. Museums preserved the artifacts of war, so that future generations would remember. But humanity had survived, and more than survived. They had become something new. The first interstellar diplomatic conference was held on Earth's surface in a city rebuilt from the ashes. Representatives from 100 species attended. Many of them had overthrown their Valoran masters in the years following Earth's resistance. They came to thank the humans who had shown them that freedom was possible. Admiral Jisoo, now elderly, but still sharp, addressed the assembly. She stood straight despite her age, her white hair short, her eyes carrying the weight of everything she had seen. "You call us heroes," she said. "You say we inspired you. You say we taught the galaxy to resist." She paused, looking out at the alien faces watching her. "But we did not fight for the galaxy. We did not think about inspiring anyone. We fought because we had no choice. Because surrender was not in us. Because we would rather die free than live as slaves." She walked slowly across the stage, her footsteps echoing in the silent hall. The Valorans thought they understood war. They were wrong. They thought war was about strength and technology and numbers. They thought the side with the bigger ships would always win. She stopped and looked directly at the crowd. War is not about strength. War is about will. It is about how much you are willing to sacrifice for what you believe. It is about refusing to give up, even when giving up would be easier. It is about standing in the ashes of everything you loved and choosing to fight anyway. She smiled, a thin expression that carried the memory of everyone she had lost. Humans do not know how to quit. We do not know how to accept defeat. We will fight until we win or until the last one of us is dead. The Valorans learned this lesson. Let the galaxy remember it. She raised her hand in salute to the flags of 100 species. Earth will never kneel. Not now, not ever. And if anyone in this galaxy ever tries to make us kneel again, they will learn the same lesson the Valorans learned. The assembly rose to their feet. Alien voices called out in languages humanity was still learning. Applause echoed through the hall. Outside, the sun was setting over a rebuilt city. Children played in parks where bombs had once fallen. Ships from 100 worlds orbited peacefully overhead. The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo for 1,000 years. Some species would submit to conquerors. Some species would bow to strength. Some species would accept their chains and serve their masters. Humanity was not one of those species. Earth was not to be ruled. Not now, not ever.